All right, so we grew up in a large family, one of 12 siblings. Well, both of us are one of 12 siblings.
We're two of
Two
12.
of 12 siblings, 8 girls, 4 boys. So you are on the lower end. You're the, how would you say it, the fourth youngest?
I usually say the ninth.
You're the ninth.
I'm the ninth.
You're
yeah.
the ninth. Okay. So growing up in a large family, what's like one of your favorite parts about it? From what you remember, like from like the more so like the time when we were like all mostly living in the same house together and like growing up together and stuff, and maybe something that is one of your more least favorite parts of growing up in the large family as well.
Well, the most of my stories start with I have a vague recollection because a lot of the exciting things happened when I was much younger, like whenever everything was, for one, when everybody was at home, or most of the children were at home. But I think one of my favorite things about the whole ordeal was there was never a need for entertaining yourself because there was always somebody doing something. At the very least, you could just watch, and just or you could be a part of it, or what have you. So that was always fun. There was always something going on, and it was nice to be able to just hang out at any given moment, which is oddly enough also part of the detriment because one of the things as I noticed as I got older is I didn't really know how to be alone, and I got a lot of anxiety from being alone because I rarely was, and so I didn't learn how to handle being alone.
Yeah,
and as I got older, that you end up being alone a lot more often.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to know how to handle yourself. And I've learned more in adulthood about how to do that. But
do you remember like ever being alone, like home alone, kind of a situation when we were growing up in the house?
I remember being once I got older, once I was 16, 17, I remember being home alone, just myself, far more often. When I was younger, you could escape to your room, but there were always people in the house.
Yeah. Did you share a room with someone else, or did you and Judah share a room?
Yeah, several different instances. I shared a room with Judah. I believe we shared a room at one point.
Me and you?
Yeah. So having my own room didn't happen until I was, aside from the downstairs pantry, which wasn't really a pantry. I don't know what it was, but it was big enough to be a room, but we used it as a pantry.
I think I had that room for a while as well. It's amazing how, like, I think I have lived in almost every single room of that house that we grew up in. Like, things were constantly moving around and shifting.
It was part of the fun to switch rooms every
it was
every
exciting.
7 or 8 months.
Yeah.
I at one point, because we had the upstairs, like essentially the upstairs and the downstairs were both complete as far as you had everything you needed. There were bathrooms in both places. There was a kitchen in both places. And I remember we would switch back and forth between which one was our main living space.
Yeah.
And at one point, the downstairs living room, kitchen, and bathrooms were the main space, and the bedrooms were upstairs. And it was during that time that Judah and I had a bunk bed in the upstairs kitchen, and and in the pantry of the kitchen. That was also the time that we had those 5 ferrets, and they were in the pantry. And I remember it smelling real bad.
It was not good.
No, and for a period of time we didn't even have like sheets or curtains up, so zero privacy. The kitchen's like open to the other living room, so that was an interesting time.
For anybody that's wondering about these ferrets, I had asked my mom to get me a ferret because that's what I wanted. I wanted a pet ferret, and she got on Craigslist and found a group of 5 ferrets that all came together. There was a big cage and everything for them, and brought them home. And like I was so excited, dude. And I got the cage all set up and whatnot. And like these ferrets do not smell particularly good, especially when there's 5 of them, and you're not very good at taking care of small animals, as I was when I was younger. And they were kind of boring, dude. Like they didn't want to hang out or nothing. Like they wanted out of their cage so that they could escape and get away. So like they just weren't very fun.
No, they would. We had the vents in the basement were up on the ceiling, and every once in a while, you would hear some scuttling, and you'd look up, and one of the ferrets would be popping their head out of the vent.
Well, what happened was, so all of them figured out how to get out of their cage, and several of them got inside the air ducts, and there was one point in the duct where there's a square cut out, and you would hear the scampering, and I'd have to wait there for it, because every once in a while poke its head out, and I'd have to grab it. But one of them, I found 4. There was still one missing, and I couldn't find it. And I finally heard some scampering around in the actual air conditioner unit itself. It had worked its way all the way down into the air conditioner, and I took it apart. Had to take it apart to find this thing, and I finally found it. And then put it all back together. And then I asked my mom to can we get rid of
these things? Who needs them?
Not a fan.
Weren't they free?
Probably. They seem like free ferrets.
I remember that the Craigslist, like it came with all these things, came with the 5 ferrets and all this stuff, and it was free. And I feel like that should have been a sign. Maybe this wasn't the best choice.
Yeah. Ferrets are better if you pay for them, at least probably.
Yeah, they're better if other people have them.
They are. I've had friends that have ferrets. I love them. They're super cool, and like they're just like really funny characteristics. But yeah, I'm glad for them to own them, and I'll just go visit every once in a while. Right. My opinions have been tainted. So, do you still like today have a harder time like being alone, or is that something that you've kind of adapted to? As you said, you spend a lot more time alone the older you get.
It's something that I've adapted to in the last 2 years or so, because the instinct was not once I had all this involuntary alone time. The instinct was not to learn how to deal with that better. The instinct was to not be alone. And so I would go and hang out with friends anytime that any chance that I could get. Spend a lot of time on my phone, as we all do. But I've noticed that became an escape from just sitting alone with my thoughts. But yeah, in the last 2 years or so, really in the last year, I've come to really enjoy alone time. In fact, I almost can't go without it. If I go spend all day at work and then I come home and someone wants to hang out, and sometimes it's I'm ready to go, but other times I'm like, give me an hour and a half, 2 hours to decompress by myself in my room, and then we'll go hang out.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that life just gets more stressful and we need more time to like decompress? Because like I feel like the older I've gotten, it seems to be a common story with people, is that like the older you get, the more you love to make plans and try to come up with excuses as to why you can't go to them anymore. And there's something very satisfying about getting out of a set of plans. I love even if it would have been so fun to go.
I know. I love when plans get canceled. I mean, Will, the rock climbing that he was talking about, that ended up getting canceled. And I was really excited to go, but then he canceled, and I was like, oh, thank God.
What a free night. Because then it makes the night feel like it was a free night.
Yeah, it's free.
Like you can do anything you want to without any mental consequences, because you were supposed to be somewhere else anyway.
Right. Yeah, so this isn't where I'm supposed to be, but this is where I'm at, so I'm just going to enjoy it. As opposed to, there are some nights where I don't have anything planned, and I'm almost a little sick of alone time, and but I'm making plans. Initiating that is another a bit of a struggle. So you end up just finding you could do the exact same thing on a night where plans got canceled, and it's the best night of your life, versus a night that you didn't have any plans and you're just bored. and it's kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Exact same activities. You just watch TV or what have you. But yeah, so it's definitely a mindset thing.
Do you find yourself to be an initiate of finding people to hang out with or making plans, or do you wait around for other people to make the plans and you go along with it?
Usually the latter. Usually I'm a follower. Other people make the plans. Which is really it's sometimes it's nice to be that way because there's making plans is a lot of work. And then other times when you're with other people who are that way and don't particularly excel at the structuring of an event,
don't do anything.
then you don't do anything, or everything comes down to you. And then you're all stressed out, and then
it's whoever is the most.
Yeah, whoever's the
leader.
most motivated to make whatever's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it's me, and I'm not that motivated. So the plans end up happening, they're usually about half baked.
Yeah.
So,
do you feel like when you were younger, with there being so many of us living under the same roof, was it ever challenging to kind of get the individual attention that that we all need to some degree, and not just be looked at as one big, pack, either from a mom and dad or from other siblings?
Yeah. I would say absolutely. One of the that's I mean, I've told you about this, but there's a thing called attachment style or attachment theory, which involves several different attachment styles, and usually the theory is that the first 11 months to 2 years of your life, and then onward, still has an effect. But those first 2 years, and the way that your caretakers and the people in your life act around you and towards you affect how you attach to people in your for the rest of your life. And you can kind of change it here and there and become more aware of it, but there's nothing you can really do to change it because it's so ingrained. And one of the things that I've learned about myself is that I have an anxious attachment style, which is kind of like characterized by a fear of abandonment. And I most certainly was not abandoned as a child, but to the infant and toddler mind, just not getting enough attention if to you it feels like life or death as a baby. It's not, but that's how it translates. So that's definitely something that I would say. There's only so much, especially for mom and dad. There's only so much that can go around when there's 11 other kids that need something right now.
Oh yeah.
So there's really no way around that.
Oh no, and I mean I even think about like trying to maintain relationships with as many of my siblings as I can, especially now that we're all older and stuff, and how difficult it is to even find the time to go have conversations with everybody. Even trying to do this podcast, have as many of you guys on as I can. Like it's just hard with busy lives. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. How do you feel like this attachment syndrome that you're talking about? Like, what does that look like for you today?
What it looks like, and it's for different people. The intensity of it shows up in different areas of attachment. So for some people, it's more so their friendships. Some people, it's familial relationships. A lot of people, it's romantic relationships, and that's where I shine. So I have noticed it in other aspects, but it is most certainly most prevalent in that aspect, and not being aware of why whatever these things are.
What is the anxiety part though? Like, is it anxious that someone that you're romantic with or whatever not paying attention to you, or like not ignoring you from like you send a text message and like they don't respond to it right away? Kind of anxious about those kinds of things.
Yeah, those types of things. It has to do a lot with like I said, fear of abandonment, whether that's happening or not.
Yeah.
yeah, I have noticed that a lot whenever involved with someone and they either appear to me as if they are pulling away or they actually are pulling away.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any difference to me
Yeah.
because it goes to my brain the same way. And it's sort of it's panic is what it is. And I've gotten to the point where learning enough about it and learning enough about myself and growing, I can identify that that's happening and do what they call self-soothing, which is another thing I didn't learn
Is
how
that
to
like
do.
you go get some ice cream?
Yes, that can be like that. Usually it's what I do is I try to identify what I'm feeling and then ask myself what lies I'm telling myself about that, and then look for evidence as to why that's a lie, and then ask myself what I need and how can I get it for myself without necessarily relying on somebody else. Because in a situation like that, I would probably, in the past, I would go and do something to distract myself, and sometimes those were destructive things. Sometimes they were positive things, and sometimes I would just go and try and talk to somebody else.
Sure.
To occupy my mind instead of just sitting with those feelings.
Distraction always it seems to be the thing that people are drawn to the most. But for me, like I can distract myself. Like I can find like usually video games or things like that are great distractions for me if I'm under pressure or feeling anxiety. But that doesn't make the anxiety go away. It just suppresses it for a little while, and then I start thinking about all the things that I was anxious about in the first place. And so it sounds like you have kind of like a way of forcing yourself to go through a rational thought kind of a process, which, anxiety is generally very irrational, where you don't even know where it's coming from.
Right.
And so something like that kind of helps me too. I don't have exactly like but simply going for a walk and forcing myself to talk to myself out loud helps me so much whenever I have like anxiety that I know is irrational. I can't even like exactly pinpoint why it is. Like maybe I can think of like a specific, main thing that I'm thinking about. Like this is probably why I'm so anxious, but anxiety is a real pain.
It's something. And I have it about other things all the time, but it's most intense in those situations. But I'll have it at other times, and I've learned in the like romantic relationship side of things, like I've learned to deal with that so much better. But I didn't focus on any of the other aspects of my life where I get anxious,
right?
And so sometimes those will creep up, and I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah,
but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You just have to actually listen to what you're telling yourself, and think about whether or not it makes any sense. It usually doesn't.
Right. For me, I've definitely had anxiety for a long time, but it wasn't until really like not recently, but a couple of years ago that I started to realize that that's really what it was. Do you feel like that at all too? Like where you're like, oh, this is anxiety. That's what I'm feeling now. Like,
I didn't know that. I mean, I'd heard about anxiety, sure,
of course,
but I didn't know that I had it, and I had it every day, all the time, until I was 20. And then I was like, "Are you kidding me?" This whole time. It was, and I feel like there's a lot of people that are like that, where it when you're younger, if you don't, you never take the time to consider that you have anxiety, and it's really less about having anxiety and more about experiencing anxiety.
And how much I think it's probably a bit on a spectrum. I think probably everybody has anxiety to some level. Some people have it to where it's very debilitating in life. Although I do know some people that just seem like they don't have anxiety, and I'm so jealous of those people. There's a couple of people in my life that are just like that. Nothing phases them. They could be the butt of like, but of so many jokes, and even people that are like actually like being hostile towards them, like waltz right through
Yeah.
it, man. Like
I-
I'm so jealous of those.
Our cousin Lane
Mm-hmm.
is one of those people. He told me one time, he was like, yeah, no matter what I do, I have a good time. And I was like, wow, I can't imagine.
I wish I could have that mentality.
No matter what I do, I almost
Yeah.
am guaranteed to not enjoy a portion of it at least.
So, with there being so many of us as well, do you feel like there was a strong sense of like unity between siblings? And I'm curious. I've talked to Anna, who's kind of on the upper end of the age groups. It's kind of four quadrants. You know, there's the 4, 4, and 4. So you're like right at the top of the bottom 4.
Right.
So from your recollection, do you remember like having a pretty tight knit community? You know, kind of feel with your siblings, or did you guys fight a lot?
Yeah, far less so than from what I've heard, as it seems the older 2/3 experienced.
Less unity.
Less unity. I felt I looked up to all of the older siblings, and a lot of times there was I wasn't really a part of that group because I was just a kid, and you guys were teenagers, so you were off doing things. I remember I remember there you guys, I don't know if you were there actually, but some of the older siblings were watching a movie, and I was living in that pantry at the time.
Sound like Harry Potter, dude.
Harry Potter.
Look, listen, this was actually a pretty nice pantry.
It was a big, nice pantry.
I think that room used to be like a library at one point,
Yeah,
and then it was like turned into a storage. Like,
been any
every
number
room
of
in our
things,
house
yeah.
has been every. You know, I think it was the bathroom at first,
Yeah.
and then
But they were watching a movie in the living room, and the living rooms had different formats as far as where the TV was placed and such. But at this time, I was on a bunk bed in in my room, the pantry, and I had a little Swiss Army knife, and I got to the top. It wasn't like a finished ceiling, and I got to the top, and I cut myself a hole in the drywall, and they told me I couldn't watch it because it was I wasn't old enough.
what was the movie? Do you remember?
It was Vampires Suck, the Twilight parody.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
And I watched the entire movie through that hole, and just to feel like I was a part of the group. But the whole point is that I spent most of my time looking up to and wanting to be a part of a group that I wouldn't really fit into just because I was too young, and less time focused on spending time with the siblings that were around my age. Although we did, but I remember that being kind of characterized. So the unity was partly my fault because I wasn't looking for unity where it would be easier to have it.
Right.
I was looking for it where I couldn't have it as much.
I almost feel like everybody. I mean, like I have a very similar story. I remember when I was a little bit too young to be able to like stay up late and watch the movie with Micah, Joelle, and Anna, and whoever was watching. I remember they were watching the cartoon version of The Hobbit, and I wanted to see it.
Scared the piss out of me, that movie.
Oh, did it?
I did watch it.
No,
yeah.
I didn't. I never got to see it. I was living. This was the old house. I don't know how much you remember the old house where you.
Basically nothing.
Yeah, I don't even. Maybe you were born, but just barely or something.
Yeah, I know. I was there for a few years.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, there was a second level, and I was sent to bed, and I didn't even get to watch it, but I did sneak down to the bottom of the stairs and listen to it the whole time, which is not as good as I didn't have a good angle for a hole anywhere
hole.
in any watch holes. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's that hole's still there. I check every once in a while. I mean, obviously it's still there, but it's just as a nostalgic moment, I'll peek my head in there and be like, there she is. I watched the whole thing.
So the oldest of us 3 boys were all 8 years apart. So we're kind of at least Mike and I were almost too far apart to really be like close. But you had Judah, and you were
5
5 years.
5 years.
Oh, that's still actually more than I than I thought. So were you guys? I don't know. Do you feel like you had a more brotherly bond with him? Because you guys were closer in age, although 5 years isn't much more than
Yeah, it's
much
not
less than
much
eight.
less. It I would say that when we were younger, definitely not so much. The kind of because of the thing that I was saying, like I was focused on getting older and being a part of the group who was also getting older at the exact same rate, and that I was never going to catch up. So definitely less so than you would think, especially because by the time, I mean, 5 years is a big enough gap that it's not, like you said, it's not that much less.
Right.
In recent years, I mean, Judah and I live together now.
Right.
I mean, we lived together for a long time, but now we live together, not at mom and dad's house.
Yeah.
And we've gotten so much closer
yeah.
through that. But I remember there being, I mean, we've got an 8-year gap, and I definitely idolized you to a large degree, and so much so that everything that you did, I wanted to do. And most of those things, there's things now that I'm much better at you than, but all of those things you were better than me. And it felt like it was all I had. So like all I have is to be not quite as good as you. And eventually I grew out of that because I realized that we're different, and I can't be a better version of you because you're already the best version of you.
I am the best version of me. I've still not seen another one quite as good as me.
But
at being me.
But I can be the best version of me.
Absolutely.
And so that in the last, again, 3 years or so, that's individuality has become very important to me.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was another thing that there were so many different personalities in the house, and it felt like a challenge to be completely you, because there were so many things to see other people do, see how other people act, adopt their humor, adopt characteristics that you pick out and you find interesting, and then before you know it, you're a conglomeration of all of your siblings.
Sure.
And so that can, I mean, that is sort of how individuality works. I mean,
nobody is an original person. Everyone is a conglomeration of all these little things that they
all the influences of
the people that are around them, and obviously the largest group of people around you was your 11 other siblings. So that's, I mean, it makes complete sense. I mean, I even know that I steal little characteristics from other people, and I even like caught myself like, I like the way he said that. I'm gonna start saying that word exactly how he said it because it was funny. And, I know I do that. And, but if you take a little bit here and a little bit here, then it just becomes
it's your own recipe. Eventually. And obviously you can't avoid that, and I don't think you should. I love taking things. I like taking things from TV shows, people that I hang out with and spend time with. But it felt like it was to too large of a degree when I was younger because I didn't seem to have any of my own things that I came up with.
Right.
And that has since changed, but like I know I was known by the younger siblings, especially, nearly everything that came out of my mouth was a quote from a movie. And I always thought that was cool. And then at one point I realized maybe I should say some of my own things. And then I started doing that. But
that seemed like a very common trait in our family. Like we were all movie quoters. We loved quoting movies. And I've been criticized from other people, like, and as I've gotten older, for constantly quoting
Yeah.
movies, especially like movies that I remember watching growing up.
Yeah.
Which some movies I watched growing up, I also realized nobody else has ever seen.
Yeah, which is actually a blessing because then you can if there's some funny stuff or you make it funny or whatever.
Oh yeah, nobody knows.
They got
it's
no
not
idea.
you.
They think
Yeah.
it's all
You make that
natural.
up, Matthias?
Yeah, I came up
You
with that
should be a
myself.
stand-up comedian. Like, no, stolen.
Yeah, yeah. No, that was definitely. I mean, I still quote movies all the time.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
Jude and I will get on a roll with Surf's Up quotes, the penguin surfing. We love that movie, and we can go for usually 20 minutes or so with breaks, but 20 minutes where we'll be quoting the same scene over and over again, changing words just because we think it's funny. And specifically, there's a scene where he's making a surfboard out of a log, and or he's trying to teach him how to make a surfboard, and so he's like he's just saying stuff like, "Oh, you're sitting on koa wood there. You know, some of the best surfboards in the world are made of this stuff. You got a koa board?" And he's like, "Nah, I don't have a board. Well, you wanna make one?" Nah. What? Get off your lazy bum. We're making a board. And we'll take that and just take the context of making a surfboard and change it into something else. Like when we were snowboarding in Colorado, all of us, we just changed it to the whole movie we basically just quoted, but it was in surfboarding terms, and it was the funniest thing.
So you went through a phase where you kind of like, found your individuality, or at least like recognized that like you didn't have to follow somebody else's, characteristics. You could make your own outside of the family. That kind of goes along a little bit with, like, do you remember a time? So, I mean, we grew up in a Christian home. We were, I would say, more on the conservative side. I mean, there was in the groups that we grew up in, there was all kinds of influences of certain kinds of ideas and things like that. So do you remember or recall a time when like you kind of evaluated like what you actually believe, whatever that is, when it comes to not just religion or politics or whatever, but like everything? Do you kind of recall a time when you started going through a process of like evaluating, like, is this what I actually believe? Is this actually coming from me?
Yeah, absolutely. It started after my marriage ended. I pretty much I spent about a year with basically no growth after that, and that was a pretty rough year, as you can imagine. But
A lot of alone time.
A lot of alone time, and not my favorite kind.
Yeah.
So, but it was in the last 2 years. So that was when I was 20. So, in the last 2 years where I evaluated, especially in regards to religion, because that was one of the largest factors in who I was. I was a Christian, and that was my that felt like my identifier, and basically the skeleton of who I was. And so it also felt like for the longest time that couldn't change because that was my structure.
Right.
And it was very scary to think about not having it, but it was also scary to think about having it because I felt at the same time that I was in a box that I didn't want to be in, but it felt like there was no other choice.
Almost like a lens that you had to look at every other thing through in order to kind of evaluate it through that lens.
Yeah, it made it very difficult to be open-minded about new ideas, open-minded about people that I met, and I at a certain point, and this has happened to me a lot, where I don't realize that I'm thinking something until I say it out loud. And a lot of times I'll change my mind about something based on a conversation I'm having where I say that thing out loud, the new idea, I say it out loud. And I hadn't actually committed to it until I vocalized it.
Yeah.
And then I hear it and I'm like, oh, I like that.
Oh.
I like that. But I remember saying that to somebody that that I'm not a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time I'd ever said it out loud. And it became real right then. And it felt very freeing to feel like I was stepping out of what I perceived to be a box. Obviously, people who, a lot of our other siblings, don't feel as though that is a box.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it always was. And
well, it's different for everybody too, because I also went through a similar thing, and I actually felt like in order to really evaluate whether or not this is what I believe, Christianity, I had to completely get rid of not just Christianity, but like everything that I believe and start over.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that I wasn't a Christian in order to have a clean slate that I can evaluate things through without any lens, to see if I land back on, on that.
And that's an interesting concept because I feel like a lot of people, even people who do have that true transition to this becoming your own, this belief system, a lot of people will do a hot swap, and almost like it's like a skip in the track, and then it continues. Whereas for me, I mean, I am open to the idea of pretty much anything as far as what I might believe in the future.
Right.
But yeah, completely letting it all go and letting a lot of different things go in turn because of that was the only way that I could turn around and grow myself. And then at this point, and I had a lot of hostility towards Christianity because of it. And at this point, I definitely don't. But I kind of went from closed-minded from the Christian perspective to closed-minded from right outside the Christian perspective. Because there was it was a process to let everything go. Because you say I'm not a Christian. Well, what about all these things that you've always believed that are not necessarily like they're adjacent to your Christianity? Are you going to let those go too? And most of them I did slowly, one by one, and it was a lot of work. And some of them I kept, and some of them I still have. Some of them are going to go away in a week. It's ever changing, which I think is really cool.
There's something that feels really freeing about being that open-minded to be able to change your mind on things if a better representation presented itself that made sense. I really enjoy going through life not feeling so tied down to any structure of ideas because the world is constantly changing and new things are constantly being presented to me, and I love being open-minded to think about them and decide whether or not that makes sense or that's stupid.
I love changing my mind about things, and because it feels so new and it can be very exciting. But yeah, I definitely know what you mean. It's kind of like you said, a lens. The glasses lift off, and now you're looking at raw data.
Raw data. But now you have to like reevaluate all those things that might have a different perspective on them now. So yeah, it's interesting. So you were one of the ones that went to public school, right? Did you go through public school your entire schooling?
I started 3rd grade, went to 5th grade, was homeschooled 6th grade, didn't do anything. So I went back to public school 7th grade through 12th grade.
Gotcha.
Was there more to the question?
No, I was. Did you enjoy going to public school? Do you feel like that was a valuable thing for you?
Yeah, I do think it was a valuable thing for me. I think that there's a perceived benefits from both sides. I was never homeschooled as an older child, and so I don't really know what that could have been like, especially if I had actually done my like in 6th grade, if I had done my homework, then I probably could have kept being homeschooled, and then I would have found out.
Sure.
But I didn't do anything, so so it definitely I enjoyed the social aspect of it. I made a lot of friends, and I got to play sports, which was super fun. I got to play soccer and golf, and those are things that have carried with me as far as like my interest in soccer and golf specifically, and my dislike of football actually also came from high school. But yeah, I perceived it as a positive about 60% of the time.
Do you think it was beneficial to your social skills? I think that homeschoolers tend to have this kind of stereotype of being not very good socially, awkward, and not great at speaking, to crowds and things like that. I was talking with Anna, which we both kind of felt like being a part of such a large family, it kind of like forced you to have more of those social skills because you didn't have like that alone time like we were talking about earlier. But school is also and I had, the circus and stuff that I was doing. So like I had another social structure that I was, going through. Do you think public school increased your confidence with crowds and social activities?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I especially like doing things like my freshman year, I did drama, and I was the lead in a play.
Ooh.
Yeah, I played the dead Christmas groom. It was like a gender reversed corpse bride.
Oh, okay.
So
That's immediately what I was thinking.
Yeah, I was the corpse bride, but I was the dead Christmas groom.
Okay.
And so things like that, choir, singing in front of people, which is still terrifying. And I have to slip into kind of a flow state of sorts. Not that hard anymore, but even now to sing in front of other people, even though I'm pretty good at it. But yeah, so choir and doing all those sorts of things, being in front of people and being perceived, I think definitely was a positive. I think it also had some negative effects. Always feeling like you were being watched or judged because you probably were. It was public school.
Yeah.
Was not my favorite.
By other students.
Other students, teachers, usually other students. But and that's where my all of my silly little skills came in handy, because if I could perform for these people that were watching me, then they would like me and think I'm cool.
Yeah.
And they did.
Oh yeah.
And so that was I often feel like if I didn't have fun circus skills to show people in school, I might not have been quite as popular.
Did that turn you into a bit of a show off? Do you feel like?
Yes. Yeah. No, I was definitely a show off, and I was known for being a show off. But what was nice is I usually didn't. I was known enough for the things that I could do that I usually didn't have to just cold turkey show someone something cool. There was usually somebody who would ask me and be like, and they there's a new kid at school, or there's a group of some people at a party or a dance or something, and they're like, oh my God, you got to see what Levi can do with a broom. He can balance it on his chin, and it's crazy. And then he can do a backflip and pretty rudimentary things. Actually, they were easily impressed.
Sure.
But
It works though. It doesn't take much to be the coolest kid in the room with a little bit of interesting skills.
Yeah.
Were you not just a show off, but did you enjoy showing up other people that were trying to do the same kinds of things? Or?
Yes. Specifically, it usually came down to flips Yeah, like at assemblies. I remember one year specifically, I think it was my sophomore year. There was somebody in every, like all of the four grades were sitting in different corners of the gym. It was like some school pride, assembly thing. And there's just a portion of that where everybody's just trying to make the most noise and get the most attention from the other three. And there was this particular year, there was at least one person in every grade that could do some sort of flip. And I remember the seniors, they had somebody out there that, or the freshmen had somebody that did a backflip, and then the seniors had somebody who did 3 backflips in a row, and they were pretty much just back tuck, rest, back tuck, back tuck, kind of like that. Like it wasn't a momentum carrying type of thing. And I got down there and I screamed. Everybody was screaming. I was like, ah! And then I ran and did a backflip off the wall, which is actually, aside from it being a little scary, is actually easier than doing a backflip standing.
But it's way cooler.
And they loved it. And then I took off and did some back handsprings and ended it with a back whip. And then everybody quieted down because I won.
Yeah, it's addicting. I remember definitely when I was younger. Well, I remember the exact moment that it kind of like switched for me. I was a show off all the time because I was able to show up pretty much anybody at any like physical skill.
Yeah,
I was just naturally good at it, and like it wasn't my fault, but and the girls thought it was the coolest thing. So like it was intoxicating to like show off, to get that kind of attention. But one of my best friends, Joey, I remember who I grew up with. His name is Leon, but we always called him Joey. We went and had dinner one night, and he told me like how difficult it was, kind of being my friend all the time because I was constantly stealing, like he basically told me like felt like he was living kind of in a shadow of me when it came to like just other people in our lives, because I was the cool one because I did all the cool tricks. That changes when you get older, like it's not as important, but when you're younger, you know how small things are the big things. But anyway, like that made me that hit me so hard, dude. Like because I didn't even like think about it. Like I was never like. It was never intentional, but I didn't even realize like how it was impacting other people around me. So anyway, like I pretty much like instantly like I no longer felt the need to like constantly show people up. It was just snapped for me. But
the fact that 'cause there was a period of my life where I spent my alone time was spent learning how to do things that people would find impressive, and that's what I would spend most of my time doing. And and then I would perfect them or get better at them, and then learn new things, and it was very fun. But I realized that I didn't do anything for myself because I purely enjoyed it. I did enjoy, like I enjoyed juggling. I learning new card tricks was fun for me. But ultimately I wouldn't, maybe juggling, but ultimately I wouldn't have learned magic tricks if I didn't have anybody to show them to. And that's kind of the point. But when that's most of the things that you do, it starts to feel a little like you're living for other people and not for yourself.
Yeah.
So, and I still do that. I still like, I mean, I've been getting into guitar a lot recently. And I've been playing guitar for 4 years and haven't gotten any better until about 3 months ago when I actually started practicing. But I've been writing songs, learning other people's songs, having a great time, and I love it. And it actually is very therapeutic, and it's something that I do when I'm alone a lot, and I love it. But I I still can't wait to show people.
Yeah, well, there's something about it that
Yeah.
you know, their performance skills.
Yeah.
You know, so it was a shame. I always thought when people were like called it a show off thing, because like that's the entire point of learning something like this. You don't learn magic to do for yourself.
Yeah.
So being in the younger bracket of the siblings, the lower four, do you feel like you had a different kind of upbringing than the older bracket? And was there anything about that was I don't know, that you either were jealous of, or just like something that you noticed, like, you know, they had it so much different than you, or anything like that?
Yeah. I think that it's an interesting medley, because the older siblings to some degree were the ones raising the younger siblings.
Right.
And so having being raised a certain way, and then before you're even fully an adult, you turn around and start raising somebody, and so
Right.
you have the only experience you have is how you were raised for the last 10 years or whatever. So it was interesting sometimes getting the perspective of like what you were supposed to do and what you weren't supposed to do. But it was different from what mom and dad did sometimes. And then especially once pretty much everybody was out of the house, save from me and the younger three, having that, it definitely felt much calmer. And I don't know, it doesn't seem like things have been calm for a long time. But it definitely felt like there was the different phases of growing up for me were weird, because at the tail end of growing up, it felt more like a normal sized family.
Right, because there weren't as many people
Right, there weren't as
still
many.
living at home. Now, a lot of the older siblings would argue that the younger ones had it much easier in some remarks. They would feel, and I'm not saying, I'm not saying
Right,
myself, that mom and dad were a little bit less strict on you guys,
Yes.
letting you guys get tattoos and things like that.
Yeah. Well,
I had to get my tongue pierced at Waffle House because
Yeah.
they wouldn't let me do it. So. A true story.
it is a true story. I would also, I like to tell people other people's stories, and that was one of them.
Did you?
I love telling people about.
It's a quite hell of a story, dude.
So what I would say is that perspective is reality. And what I mean by that, or rather, perception is reality. And what I mean by that is that your perspective is the only one you have ever had and will ever have. You can try to understand other perspectives, but you're filtering everything through your own. So what that means to me is that whatever you believe to be true for you is true. So if you or any of the other older siblings think that we had it easier and you had it harder, then that's true for you, because you're believing that. And if I believe that we had it harder, which I don't necessarily, but if I do, then that's true for me. So all that in to say that we probably might have had it a little bit easier in some ways, and in other ways it was probably more of a challenge that you guys didn't have to experience. Kind of hard to pick that apart when you can't see both perspectives side by side.
I know what you're saying, and
But-
I 100% agree with you. That's I argue that all the time. Yeah, everyone has their own individual experiences, and you may feel like things were much, this level of easy for you emotionally or whatever, and your siblings were, here, but what you're forgetting is that the baselines would also be staggered. So it's not a level baseline to be, for that kind of data
Right.
to work. Yeah. Do you do you remember being closest with one of your other siblings, like growing up? Like you had a special bond with anybody specific, or were you just kind of like the group? And has that changed? Obviously, when you've gotten older, like do you have somebody that you're closest with.
I that's something that I actually find really interesting because I feel as though as I got older, I realized that I didn't know really any of my siblings until I until I turned 18 or so. It kind of felt like we were just coexisting, making each other laugh, and just having a good time or having a bad time or whatever it was. But we weren't getting to know each other. And obviously, you're becoming someone. You're not, to a degree, you're not already someone to know. You're constantly changing,
Right.
which is true in all phases of life, but especially when you're that young. But what that means is that as I got older, if I didn't put effort into knowing somebody,
Right.
then I didn't know them. And just because we lived together didn't mean that there was that level of understanding each other. And so as I got older, when I, after I turned 18-ish, and then really after I turned 20, pursuing relationships became more of a interest to me, and especially after realizing that I felt like I didn't know the majority of my siblings, and we had always spent time for a lot of them always spent time in groups, and so one-on-one conversation, like some of them I don't even know how, like if I asked them to go to get coffee with me, just the two of us, I'm sure we would figure out what to talk about, but at the moment I can't think of.
It sounds scary.
Yeah, it sounds like
front,
I don't like I really don't know where we would start.
Yeah.
And we would, it would work out and we'd find common ground, and
Yeah.
we'd probably make each other laugh because we have similar senses of humor. And, but yeah, that dawned on me at one point that, the relationship is not a given, because we grew up together.
Right.
Necessarily.
Well, the people that we were during the time that we were all living in a house together, is almost completely different. Like there's maybe some characteristics that, carry over, but by way of like getting to know someone, like, if you had had a deep relationship with me when I was, living in the house, it wouldn't mean much. Not the same person, completely different.
Right.
We'd had to completely start over. And I'm glad that we, have.
Yeah.
And, I feel like I know you quite well now. But yeah, no, I agree. There's like, still several siblings of mine that I it's been very surface level, and I would love to like actually get to know them. But it's a hard thing to do.
It's a hard thing to start. What's actually easier is where there is some baseline relationship, just growing that, and like for example, after I watched Anna's interview, I went and had dinner with Mom, and I told her that for Humdinger Day I had Anna, and I didn't get her the thing that I was gonna get her, because I'm a very anxious gift giver, and it was a robe that I was gonna get her, and I didn't know how to pick a size, and I would get flustered and just quit. And I did that for months after Humdinger Day. And but I was talking to Mom about it, and she suggested that I take her, we go and get something to eat, and then we go shopping together. And I was like, why didn't I think of that? It's a great idea. And then we talked about Dad. He wants to play pickleball, and I say, let's go play pickleball. And I remember that conversation and watching Anna's interview. I kind of felt a little fire spark as far as like, man, let's get to know some of my siblings,
Right.
which is exciting because I've spent a while where I was more in the perspective of, I'm just gonna live my life and that'll be fine. But so and there's give and take between the two of them, but yeah. So
Yeah, a lot of people say like, family is like the most important thing, like, or one of the most important things in life, and that's such an interesting thing to say, because it's so. I feel like it's a little bit different when you have such a large, diverse family now, where like everyone's everywhere, and like it's almost impossible to maintain like a really strong relationship with each and every one of them. You know, so is only some family the the most important thing in life? But
well, yeah,
I think it's an interesting.
It is interesting because if you have I think if you have a smaller group, then for one, it's easier to keep up with the changes in knowing someone, because there's less work. You don't have to do it 11 times. You can just do it once or twice, and just keeping up with that. So I think you may get to know your in that situation your siblings better over a longer period of time, because there's there's literally fewer relationships to try to cultivate.
Right.
Which is interesting.
It is interesting. Last thing, man, I just want you to share like maybe one of your favorite memories from our childhood growing up, or not ours, yours. You can leave me out of it. You don't have to be in it. Your childhood growing up.
My childhood growing up. It's hard to say. I have a lot of most of the memories that come to mind are not particularly good ones. Like the first thing that came to mind was just one time that a bunch of the younger siblings were home, and I think Cora and Gloria were babysitting, and they told us to go outside, and they locked the door, and we sprinted around to the front of the house to try and get in there, and they beat us there and locked that door, and they were going around locking all the windows, and it was a nightmare, but I honestly remember it fondly.
That's so funny.
Yeah, and then a lot of the times, actually, one of the few, aside from just being outside in general, the times on the trampoline, I have so many good memories on the trampoline, and I have some where I nearly died. I remember trying to do a backflip off of the trampoline onto the ground, which I'd done plenty of front flips, and that was a lot easier because your momentum you had far more control over.
Yeah.
But I tried to do a backflip, and I had successfully done it, I think once or twice, but I tried it again, and I didn't go out far enough, and I landed both of my shins right on the bar. And the trampoline was way out in the middle of the field, and it was a long, lonely, painful waddle. Really, I was crawling practically back to the house. And then other times where several of us were out on the trampoline. The trampoline was just so much fun.
I think probably universally, almost each and every one of us siblings growing up probably have good, maybe not all good, but memories of things that we did on the trampoline. We went through so many iterations of trampolines growing up. I wish we had. I wonder if we had counted like how many we have gone through, because I know some of them we didn't stake down and they blew away in like some big storms, and then we just straight up destroyed several of them.
Yeah, and the springs would start popping, and then the more springs popped, the more pressure was on those springs next to it.
Yeah,
and those would pop, and we would usually wait until about half the springs were gone before we decided that, it's time to dismantle this one and call it good. But that was dangerous, because you're jumping, and then right next to you, all you have to do is go a couple inches too far left, and there's no spring. That's just loose fabric, and right underneath that is the ground. And we even had some that were like ripped, and we kept jumping on them. You just avoid the spot until it's a little bit too dangerous to, which it was a lot too dangerous to be before we actually got to the point of getting rid of it. But anyway, man, awesome. Thanks for coming on the show, dude. This was a super fun conversation. So I appreciate the talk. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.